Hi, and welcome back to This Week in Voice, Season 6, Episode 11. My name is Bradley Metrock. I'm CEO of Project Voice. We're thrilled to have a great panel on the show today. I want to take a second and make sure everybody is aware, as I'm sure you are if you've been listening to the show, this Week in Voice over the last few episodes. Project Voice 2022 is coming up. It's April 25th through the 28th. It's really the 25th to the 27th, 28th being private meetings in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Amazon, Verizon, National Geographic, NVIDIA, Lenovo, the Washington Post, DeepGram, Open Voice Network, and as you're about to hear, DataForce and NLX, who are joining us on the show today. You can find information about that at projectvoice.ai. So we got a great show. We're going to get on into it. I'm going to introduce you to our two guests. First of all, we've got Brad Hastedt. Brad, if I'm mispronouncing that, tell me. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bradley. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's Brad Hastedt. I'm the director of AI for DataForce here in the Americas. DataForce is a subsidiary division of a company called TransPerfect. TransPerfect is the largest translations and language solutions provider in the world. We're celebrating our 30th anniversary this year. Just went over $1 billion last year, have over 7,000 global employees, 120 offices globally, and we support over 250 languages globally. DataForce is the training data arm of TransPerfect. We provide high quality human annotated training data for data science and engineering teams that are building AI, machine learning, NLP models globally. The way we do that is we leverage really what TransPerfect's built over the last 30 years, which is a community nearly 2 million strong now of course, translators, but linguists, annotators, subject matter experts, if a project requires it, medical experts, if a project requires it. And we were able to access this various expertise through our community to build these high quality usable data sets that we return back to our clients' data science teams so that they can begin the high value work, right? The moving models into production, deploying them, driving high value insights for business leaders. So that's that.
No, that's excellent. Yeah, and in our line of work, we encounter a lot of companies doing different things with data. What makes DataForce a little bit different is just the execution you bring, and also just being part of a larger organization, I think adds a tremendous amount of value to this specific type of the work with data that has to go into the future of AI. It's been great to get to know y'all. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And you're right. I think that what we do dovetails nicely into what you said and what you're doing here with Project Voice in general. Being part of the largest language solutions provider in the world naturally dovetails into what companies are doing with voice applications and projects. So we're happy to be here.
Yeah, no, that's great. Our next guest is Andrei Papancea. Andrei, just like Brad, if I mispronounced it, correct me. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bradley. Good to see you. Andrei Papancea, actually, but don't worry, hardly anyone gets it right. I'm the co-founder, CEO, and chief product officer of NLX. We specialize in transforming customer contact into personalized customer self-service, wherever that may be. And specifically, we do that through enabling our customers to build and deploy chat, voice, and multimodal conversations. We work with a slew of retail, finance, and so on. And yeah, we enable our customers to just build great customer experiences. We were talking a little bit earlier, right, on all of our bad experiences while traveling lately and whatnot. We try to make that for end users a little bit better.
That's excellent. Say your last name one more time and I will get it right.
Papancea.
Papancea.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
It's very phonetic.
Yeah, no, Papancea. Yeah, so I'm born and raised in the South, so it takes me about 10 times to do what someone else might do in 3, but nevertheless, I can get it with enough time. Welcome to the show, both of y'all. And with that, we'll get to the news. So story number one is one of two stories from VoiceBot for this week. I'm going to read the headline: Spotify rebrands Green Room Social Audio as Spotify Live, adds live stream to main app. So, we're in season 6 of this show now, and it almost never came up early on in the discussions on this show, but increasingly over time it has. The role that social audio and real-time live interactions, basically whatever you call them, have the role they have to play in the future of voice and AI. And Brad, I'll start with you on this, and then Andrei, go to you. What did you take away from this story? There's a lot of different things, a lot of different ways to view social audio. In your role with DataForce, how do you look at social audio, and what do you think of the story?
Yeah, the story's super interesting, and I'm probably like you. You're in season 6 now. It didn't come up a lot in those first few seasons. It's probably going to come up a lot more now. Even me, I've used more of this type of technology. I would say I'm a big sports fan, for example. So being part of a live community while the game's going on and being able to converse on a social platform with fans, not only of that game, but of your team, I think that's super creative. And I think it's going to be, gives you that communal experience of being at a game. And this is just a sports example, but it goes for a variety of things. Having that experience of being at a game without being actually present at the game, but you're still talking to fans, you're high-fiving, you're doing all the things you do, during a normal contest, except you might be sitting on your couch at home. So I think it's super creative. I've started using it more and more myself. So it's interesting. Their rebrand. That's just I think they want to have Spotify branding everywhere. So that makes sense that they're rebranding it to that name as well. So I think it's a good idea, and I think it's going to be a technology we talk more and more about.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And Spotify over time has shown a knack for being ahead of the curve in important and meaningful ways. They've shown good timing, and to me, there's a little bit of that going on here too. Andrei, same question for you. What do you see in your role with NLX when you look at social audio, and then what did you take away from the story?
Yeah, listen, first of all, the rebranding is likely a pretty good move for them. They already are a social brand. So, and we've seen this with other companies, right? Not necessarily in the space, but Uber's consolidated so many different lines of business into that one app. You have then companies like Meta that will sort of create the umbrella company and then spun out different companies dealing with different things. But I think in the case of Spotify, this will work out quite nicely. Especially in this increasingly remote world, right? We rely so much on all types of multimedia, right? We don't get to see each other in person as much. So putting more emphasis in the the types of mediums that we engage more and more with makes sense. And honestly, I can see implications for conversational AI in that space. Obviously, there's a live component and a human-to-human interaction in one way, shape, or form. But the ability, first of all, I could see, let's say, first of all, transcriptions. That's already in place, right? We're familiar with those types of capabilities. But I think as these types of mediums become richer from a user interface standpoint, think multimodal, imagine you're delivering some sort of content, and then you have these actionable insights as let's say maybe a live stream is happening, right? And that could be both for let's say the listeners to tap into, or the streamers themselves to be able to take quicker actions as part of the experience. So
yeah, that's interesting in terms of conversational AI, Andrei, because as more of these are adopted or have widespread adoption and more users are on these social platforms interacting, from a DataForce and TransPerfect perspective, languages, right? I mean, we're going to have more and more, be able to serve, these applications are going to have to be able to serve more and more languages as we move forward. So that's something to consider too, as these become more mainstream. And it's Spotify, they are mainstream.
absolutely.
Yeah, no, complete agreement with both y'all. And, content moderation too is something that, we've got our eye on. Hey, you're spamming everybody. We don't really want you to do that. Or, hey, you're sitting there engaging people around you, you're engaging some subset of people at this in green room, saying a bunch of stuff that, it would make even George Carlin blush. Why don't you stop doing that? The conversational AI is going to have to rise up and adapt to some of these live environments. And I think you're right. It'll be interesting to see how that happens. The other thing too, that we have our eye on is, you could call this sort of thing a social network. And if Spotify were inclined, any sort of social audio environment could be called a social network. Who knows? Maybe that is what they call it. I don't know. And I think that it's good because, just speaking for myself, I had deleted my Facebook account a long time ago, and then I recreated a new one when we bought a business and needed to use their Facebook account. Twitter has its many deficiencies. These current social networks need more competition. And I think that's a role that social audio will help play as well. Any last comments on this one?
Yeah, no, I just agree with what you just said there from a conversational AI perspective. And again, the more widespread it gets, the more and more of these models are going to need constant training. And these language or NLP training data sets, not only from a language perspective, but from a content moderation perspective, these language data sets they're trained on, prompts, utterances, you're going to need to use natural language generation to just create more and more ways that humans talk and they converse, and to train these models on for that content moderation example you gave.
Yeah, well said. Story number 2. This is from Android Central. Nest Hub Max may soon let you summon Google Assistant without saying a word. And this looks like a basic feature addition, and I guess it kind of is, but there's kind of it kind of feels a little bit different, at least to me. I don't know. I'm interested to get y'all's thoughts. And Andrei, I'm going to start with you, and then Brad, go to you. Is this just a boring feature addition that deserves a page on the web full of advertisements that's almost barely readable, and sort of a footnote, or is this something a little bit bigger for one of any number of reasons? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I agree that it's not a major feature from a, let's say maybe implementation standpoint. What's interesting about it, my mind first and foremost goes to privacy, because I think we've all, experienced either with Alexa, Google Home, what have you, where you're watching some movie on TV and all of a sudden, or like some commercial, all of a sudden they wake up, right, and start talking. How good is the implementation of their feature? I know, like for my iPhone, I have Face ID and generally won't unlock unless I focus on it, right? It tracks eye movement. Depending on the level of sophistication of how it was implemented, what if it just randomly triggers and all of a sudden, every time you you might look in its direction, but not necessarily with the intent to speak to it. It will start capturing various, lengths of audio in the house. Hard to say. Honestly, I think this is one that you have to kind of experience first and see its utility versus yelling to, let's say, Alexa or Google Home from around the room. So I'd be curious to try it out, but I struggle to see its utility off the bat. At least that's my thought. I don't know. What do you think, Brad?
Yeah, Brad, your thoughts.
It's interesting, Andrei, you say data privacy. That's the first thing that popped in my head. What are the privacy concerns and issues here? They say down at the bottom of the article, the feature also addresses potential privacy concerns by performing all video processing locally, preventing the device from sending your data to Google servers. I think everybody might roll their eyes at that and go, okay, yeah, right. I'm sure they're not ingesting any of my facial data. I'm one of those skeptical, people that doesn't necessarily believe when I hear things like that. So my first concern was privacy, but beyond that, I mean, I think you'll see more and more of this. I don't know how. I don't know if it's a huge feature right now, but I think you'll see more and more of this in different applications, not just Google. Just in DataForce alone, I mean, we've got clients from a variety of different industries, from healthcare to retail, certainly tech, that are all working on models and applications that might detect a facial tick or reactions the face has when reading, when given something to read. There are a variety of different models and projects going on right now where to detect or for various problems or issues they want to address, they're trying to train a model to detect certain things. So all that being said, I think in a variety of different models, in a variety of different industries, we're going to see a lot more of this moving forward. So I think the message is get ready.
Yeah, and I actually agree with you, Brad, too. Even if whether it's this feature or something else, I think what we're actually looking at is the increasingly multimodal nature of conversational interactions, where you're using multiple devices, channels, and things at the same time. Like we do this a lot for our customers with NLX, where sometimes, let's say you start the conversation over voice, it might not be the right user interface for a specific task. So then you can branch out and leverage other channels and synchronization to try to complete that task. They're doing something along, in that general direction as well, right? Where you have a device as a camera. I'm guessing there's probably some cool interaction with the screen once, let's say the eyes lock in with the camera and the session is activated. So I could see all kinds of more features like this in the future as well.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I didn't quite know what to think of this either, and it's really interesting to hear y'all's thoughts. I think there's two things here in my mind. First of all, it's interesting how the impact that and I forget the name of the thing that Google announced. When the moment the show's over, it'll come back to me. But where Google will make phone calls, the AI will make phone calls. Duplex.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm getting older. My brain doesn't work. Google Duplex. So the impact on Google that botched rollout had, where they rolled this thing out, they thought, wow, isn't this cool? And it is. Unfortunately, it was a little too cool and it spooked everybody. And the backlash came swiftly, and it just has sort of spooked the company with how they roll out things, to where everything is almost like under the table. It's like, hey, we're doing this thing. And, just to see what the reaction is, quietly, so that they can keep it going and, or pull it back if they need to. This is one of several things that has been announced since then, and it's all been quiet and unceremonious for the most part. The other thing about this is, Andrei, your point about the just the dynamic nature of these interactions and how multimodal involvement, these systems, these assistants rising up to meet people with in all sorts of different ways, I think is spot on. And it reminds me of a friend of mine who's Indian. I've known him for many years, and he for a long time he lived, growing up, he lived in a house with his parents and then his grandparents, and these folks, would walk around and they would have conversations that began, like they would start a sentence and the sentence would begin in English, and then it would go to some other language, then it would go to another language, then it would go back to English and then back to another language, and that's all the same sentence. And I'm like, why would you possibly be doing that? And he's like, it's just the way we've always been. And I only say that example just to sort of illustrate the same sort of mentality with multimodal interactions, where maybe we start off in interaction with an assistant speaking, but we're moving around the house or the office environment. So maybe we say a few words, and then it sees that we're over there, so it detects us, and then we say something else, and then, maybe it hears a noise and adjusts. This fluid and dynamic nature of these things comes across, to me in the piece as sort of the trend line on where we're going. But Brad, I agree with you. Privacy, both of y'all actually brought this up. Privacy will be interesting to watch with this as well. So any comments?
Yeah, you're right. And with it's gonna be who adapts, right? You've got the early adopters into a fully connected home, right? The more people that have fully connected homes, in your scenario of walking from your office to the kitchen to upstairs to change to heading out to the garage to hop in the car, the more people that have fully connected households will be able to experience that type of scenario. And those multimodal applications, they're all going to have to be trained as such, not only in language like you gave with your friend, but in different facial recognition ticks. It's not just to activate my phone, right? It can detect how I'm feeling. Am I sad? Am I happy? Whatever. And so in that scenario that you gave, I think it's just going to really depend on the consumer. How many consumers jump onto that fully connected home or into the vehicle and so on and so forth. It'll be interesting to see. I don't have an answer. It'll just be interesting to see as we move forward.
Couldn't agree more. I'm going to move on to story number 3. This is our second one from VoiceBot. Enterprise conversational AI startup Observe.ai raises $125 million. So this is a story that I included in the docket here. Not so much, yes, it's another data-oriented company, and Brad, I'm interested to hear your thoughts, as far as that's concerned. But primarily, I included it simply as a reflection on the money flowing into the space. So, Brad, I'm going to start with you, and then Andrei, go to you. This is your field. Interested to hear anything that jumped out to you about maybe, there's always some wide blue ocean. There's going to be 10 times the companies doing this sort of thing, when it's all said and done. I don't think it's really a competitive thing, but just the money flowing into the space. What stood out to you from the piece?
So this is all about customer experience, right? These guys are huge. I mean, they've raised a total of 213 million. I've heard of them for a while. I've got a background in the contact center business, and that's kind of where I got my start in AI and NLP and virtual assistants and those types of interests. And so I've heard about them for a while. They're huge, but I think overall, to your question, it illustrates the emphasis on customer experience and personalized, enhanced customer experiences, and making sure that in the contact center space, our agents, so the human agent, a virtual agent, a combination of both of them, are handling each customer in a personalized, special fashion to them, according to their tastes, according to what their concerns are, according to what they're calling about. That's what I took out of it. And you're just going to see, Bradley, to your point, there's going to be more and more investment in these types of companies and technologies moving forward. I've always liked the idea of, I might have a human agent answer the phone, your typical customer support call. I might have a human agent answer the phone, but I've got this onboard virtual assistant that's right up there on their screen or in their ear that's connected in to the full knowledge base and taxonomies of that particular client that customer's calling in for, and will be able to, based on questions that have been asked in the past, they'll be able to then pull that from the knowledge base, feed that into the human agent's ear or on their screen, and they'll be able to better properly serve that customer. I think we're going to see more, we are seeing this, but we're going to see more and more of that type of technology in those companies moving forward. And it's just, it's going to be fascinating to see. And ultimately, if it helps and increases the customer experience, I'm all for it.
Right, right on. Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. Andrei, same question for you. What stood out? And you're
Fair enough. Unmuted now. For me, what stood out was their partnership with Zoom. It seems like both companies are kind of banking on it, and it's it could create a win-win situation for them. I can relate to it from the standpoint of our partnership with Amazon, with AWS in particular. We're seeing a lot of benefit from that mutual benefit from that partnership, from a go-to-market standpoint, like the ability to scale the use cases, right? So I could totally see part of the valuation, or the new raise, that gargantuan amount, let's call it what it is, to also be tied to some of the partnerships that the company has. So it's exciting to see more of those things happening in the market, and I think that's what's gonna drive some more of the growth and consolidation in the conversational AI space in the coming, couple, I don't know, to call it a couple months, couple quarters or years, but definitely I think we'll see more of that sort. I also agree with Brad, but this was like another thing that kind of stood out to me when I was going through it.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. It's an interesting thing to think about, and I've been asked this a couple of times, to put it mildly. How many unicorns does this space support? And a related question is, what is the market size, the TAM? Let's pull out some business school jargon. What are we playing with here? And as the two of you innately know, just like I do, it can be tough to discuss that, because the question is, who isn't a customer? I work backward. Who isn't a customer? Who's not going to be a customer over the next 5 to 10 years? I'm not joking. Who isn't? Like, I guess a school teacher may not be, but even then, or the church, or maybe some nonprofit organizations, but but I would say even a mom and pop gas station is going to have some sort of data needs and some sort of conversational needs over the next decade. I would be shocked. I think it would actually be an abject failure of this technology space if they didn't. And and I say a church, I mean, churches are already using some of these bots now, like some of these mega churches. Like, there's some interesting stuff going on there we won't go into here, but as soon as I say an example of one that maybe doesn't use conversational AI, I'm proven wrong. And that's right,
doesn't use conversational AI yet, because actually I would make the argument that even for the school teacher, because here's the thing, I start with an analogy. If we're just talking conversational AI, and let's say maybe some of the viewers might not necessarily have like a good understanding of the space, then yeah, you can come up with all kinds of different examples, except for if you look at the conversational AI space as that new, and specifically conversational AI applications as that new class of applications, right? It started with desktop apps, then it went to web apps, then it went to mobile apps, and now we have conversational applications. So if you follow that path, and I think this is what we're going to see a lot more of, right? Just people interacting with technology in a conversational manner, whether it's textual or voice or multimodal, doesn't matter. The teacher could have, a teacher could have their own conversational, let's say, persona that parents could interact with to report maybe a school absence, or, ask for grades, or, whatever else, parents and teachers, or even students with their teachers, like, need to interact with. So I think really, if we look at the space as, hey, just like everyone has a website nowadays or can get the website very easily, we're going to see more of this in the future. And, from my company standpoint, that's how we're setting ourselves up to enable in the market, is really make conversational AI accessible and enable anyone to build compelling conversational experiences, and make it easier for people to talk to technology.
Yeah, if I could piggyback on that, this is why companies like Andrei's are set up perfectly, because Bradley, to your point about, hey, what's the TAM? What's our total market here? I don't know, because think about who isn't a customer. Well, also, what about your internal customers, your employees, right? There should be systems for them to interact with, HR maybe, or a certain payroll system, or if I've got questions about benefits or PTO or things like that. So it's not only building conversational models to better the customer experience and better serve your customer where they are, in to use multimodal, that term, Andrei, service the customer wherever they are, but also service your internal customer, your internal employees, help them better, help answer questions more accurately and faster, and really kind of eliminate those mundane tasks and those mundane or those waiting times that you might have between asking the questions and getting an answer. You're also dealing with your internal folks as well. And so I think when you consider it that way, whether it's the school teacher or your external customer or your internal employees, who isn't using this? And I think that's why companies like Andrei's are just positioned perfectly.
Companies like both of yours are positioned perfectly. And and I'm going to get a nasty gram about school teachers. I just know it. Look, I'm not saying school teachers are behind the curve. If anything, they're in front of the curve. But the point is, there are use cases that will come before other ones. But ultimately, I agree with y'all totally. Everybody will be using this stuff. And where it really gets interesting is, when you think about the web and the fact that if you, go to a website, what are you doing? You're either gleaning some information that you needed, you're gathering information that you didn't already possess, or you're making a transaction. And yeah, I'm sure there's other corner cases, but for the most part, it's one of those two things. And if you had a conversational AI sufficiently trained and contextual to know your patterns and whatnot, to intercept you before you even go to the web. Shoot, you may not even need to go to the web. These things will be so smart. And it's interesting to think about a world in which the web isn't in its current incantation is much less necessary. But back to the original question, just to put a punctuation mark on this, how many unicorns do we need? And the way I approach that is, if you take the cross section of any particular part of the voice and AI value chain, intercept it with an industry vertical. So let's say data annotation for automotive, for a random example. In that particular space, why would there be only one unicorn? There'd probably be multiple. So when you start to write it all out, I mean, you're talking probably triple digit amount of billion-dollar companies that can be in this space, which is insane compared to where, again, talking to where this show started, where it was Amazon and Google sucking all the oxygen out of the room, and there wasn't any money flowing into the space whatsoever, because the thought process was that if we give you some funding and you come up with something cool, then Amazon and or Google will just take it from you by force, and then you'll be out of business. And you know, that's changed obviously over the course of time, SoundHound really being the first triple-digit funding round, and then on from there. So interesting story. Any closing thoughts on this one?
Not here. I totally agree. And I just think to your point about how many unicorns, I think it just breeds competition, right? And there's going to be better and better and better products that come out. There'll be some consolidation or acquisitions and things like that. The market will settle somewhere, and then you might get specialization, right? So someone says, "Oh, I'm a conversational AI developer or NLP developer." Well, then they might say, "I do it. I focus on this niche. I develop models for this niche," and it might get nichey after that. And I think that's just the natural progression of things.
Complete agreement. Story number 4. This is from Make Use Of. We haven't quoted these folks in season 6 yet, but we've cited a few articles from them over the course of the show. This is an interesting one. You can now tell Alexa to plant a tree for you. This is interesting. So we, typically we'll end the show with some sort of bizarre or funny story, because there are plenty of them in this space. This one is kind of uplifting. It's kind of interesting and it's kind of uplifting. Andrei, I'm gonna start with you, and then Brad, go to you. Where does your mind go when you look at this story? And you're muted.
And I need to get better at this. So
Yeah.
I agree. It's super uplifting. And the first thing that came into my mind was, the efficiency of those donation platforms, where you can just very quickly, using, let's say, Apple Pay or Google Pay or something like that, you can just donate something and make it frictionless and easy. Because it's weird. I remember like a couple of years back, I would see all these ads for all kinds of, let's say, good charities that needed like funding for all kinds of different purposes. And then sometimes you tap into it, you want to give money, and then they have this like multi-page forms, like, oh damn it, I'll come back to it later, and sometimes you forget. Whereas making that transaction swift, it's almost like the Amazon like one-click checkout, right, concept. So it's really cool to see that applied to something that feels a little overdue, to be honest, like just taking care of our planet. And it speaks to where voice AI is effective, right? Just quick, simple transactions, and they managed to pack a lot of goodness into just a simple transaction. I haven't tried it yet, but that's going to be my very next thing once we get off this call. I'm going to see how many trees I can plant. Do they charge for it, or is it just like, one per Alexa account? We kind of do it.
I think it charges $1 per time to do it.
Yeah, it's $1. Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, your point's well taken, and I look forward to doing it with my son too. I'm going to tell him to do it and not telling him what it will do, and have him try it out. And I'll actually be filming that. I'll throw it on the YouTube channel. But
that's cool.
Brad, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Brad, same question to you. Where does your mind go when you see this story?
Yeah, well, first to Andrei's point, I mean, just what voice AI can do, right? And that's just such a powerful thing. And you're right, it is a small thing, Andrei, but I mean, if enough people do it, then you end up having a really good thing happen. But Bradley, to your question, those of us, who follow AI, like your audience and the three of us on the call, and kind of follow the trends and the stories of what's going on, we'll hear certain terms, right? Like, this is an example of AI for good, right? We hear the term responsible AI, and I think that's usually discussed in terms of, responsible data practices, with regard to privacy or with regard to mitigating bias as much as we can in data sets, and having not only diverse data sets, but diverse teams that are working on building AI models and building data sets to train these models. So we usually talk about responsible AI in terms of that, in terms of data. But I also think it's an example of AI for good, like building models, whether it's a voice AI model or something else, it's building models to affect change and do things for good. I think when we're on these podcasts or writing articles or we're speaking at shows, we're talking generally for commercial uses, I would say. Hey, how do we uncover new revenue opportunities? How do we save money? How do we help the customer? How do we help our own internal employees, maybe eliminate mundane tasks, automate mundane tasks and things like that? I think we generally talk about it in terms of commercial use. Well, here's an example of, no, let's just do something cool. Let's do something good. Let's help out. Let's help the planet. Let's grow a tree. It's really simple. It's really easy to do. And to your point, Bradley, hey, let's do it with our kids. Let's teach our kids the right thing to do. So it's an example for me of using AI for good.
Yeah, both of y'all had great points on that, and yeah, it's why aren't we seeing more of this? I think it's a good question, I think it's a good question to ask. Maybe it's for another time. I think it's a good thing that we're seeing it, and definitely something good to share with children. Definitely, I think something that Amazon may not even know the value of what they figured out. This might be the work of the first year new hire doing some intro project in the company or something, or maybe it's the work of an established team. But whoever it is that came up with this, you did something good, because this is something that Amazon ought to be advertising, just to be honest about it, and not just for the utility of Alexa, but for the optics necessary to combat the hostility toward growing toward big tech. But I'll conclude just with where my mind goes is, I grew up in a family business where, my grandfather started a company that ended up being very successful. And I grew up running down the hallways of that business, and I had the exposure to an early computer. And, that shaped my life in many ways, just to have that access. And I think about children, how they would be shaped and are shaped when they encounter, as a 6, 7, 8-year-old, my son is 10, going to a computer, in essence, actually not in essence, an actual computer with a smart speaker, and asking, or having this conversational exchange, Alexa, plant a tree, and then having that actually do something to alter the world that you live in. It was different 1 second ago, and now you've changed it through something that you said into technology. And just the way that would shape your mindset, I think is radical. And so I'm excited with stories like this. I think it's a great one to end on. Any closing thoughts?
No, that's a great point, and it extends to other uses too. What if my son's 11? What if he can sit down and say, Alexa, build a house, and it contributes to building low-income housing or housing in challenging areas, for people in need. I mean, there's endless uses. So I think, again, it's just an example of AI for good, and it needs to be led by maybe some of the big tech companies, and I'm glad that it is here in this case.
Perfect. Gentlemen, thank you for setting the time aside. Thank you for sharing your experience as well as your expertise with not just me, but the audience as well.
Pleasure. We're off to planting a forest now.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Bradley.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Bradley.
You got it. For This Week in Voice, Season 6, Episode 11. Thank you for listening on major podcast providers, watching if you're watching on YouTube. Until next time.